As most of you have been watching the Super Bowl, some of us were watching the latest news. And as you were watching Patrick Mahomes come back and win in overtime, the Israeli government were dropping bombs on the refugee city of Rafah, killing over 50 and wounding hundreds. Let's get to the latest news as the war continues to escalate to new unprecedented heights. The New York Times, Israel says it conducted wave of attacks on Rafah. Now, if you remember what I said yesterday in the update, that Netanyahu was working on a plan to have the Israeli military destroy what is left of Hamas south of the country. Now, again, everything is Hamas, right? These are the refugees that left Gaza City earlier, late last year in November, when the Israeli government gave warnings to the residents of Gaza City to flee to south of the country. And this is where they went. They went to Rafah, which borders between Egypt, which is right here, and Israel. Right here, you can see it's southwest of the country. It's right on the border near the Mediterranean. And it's a very small place. It has 1.5 million refugees, 1.7 million refugees in this area of Rafah, and the Israeli military is bombing it. Now, Egypt, they closed their borders and put military personnel on the northern tip of the border to make sure that the war doesn't spill over. Now, here's the thing about Egypt. There are some conflicting reports that Egypt said that they will do nothing regarding Israel's incursion into the Rafah refugee camp. Now, there are other reports that said that if it does and it interferes with Egyptian commerce or the slaughter of Palestinians, Egypt is going to get involved. And I'm willing to bet you that Egypt won't do nothing. That's only because Egypt wants to hold on to this tentative peace treaty that they have with Israel since the Six-Day War. Israel's military said early Monday that it had conducted a wave of attacks on Rafah, the city in Gaza, to which more than 1 million displaced Palestinians have fled. At about 3 a.m. local time, the military said on Telegram that its strikes on quality targets were over. Images and videos on social media, which could not immediately be verified, showed injured people and damaged buildings. And, you know, New York Times, much like The Atlantic and every other neoliberal paper, will always defend, and some progressives, these people are, they'll always defend the Israeli government and its military when it's using extrajudicial force, killing civilians. In this case, you know, they actually believe that, oh, Hamas is, they have safe spots here. They're living in the buildings. Now, what are they going by? They're going by the IDF's reports, right? But here, as you could see, the images, actual images, videos, and I've seen them on Twitter, and I follow some very reputable people on there. And they showed videos coming out of Rafah, which look like a fucking horror show. And yet the New York Times is saying that these are not verified videos. But they'll actually believe without measure that, oh, the reason why Israel is attacking the refugee center is refugee camp is because the IDF says there's Hamas there. Everything's Hamas. The table, the food, the cat. Israel's most important allies, including the United States and Britain, have warned Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to go ahead with a plan to send troops into Rafah because Biden's administration is at stake. And with every passing second that Israel conducts these vicious disgusting, immoral attacks on a defenseless people. Pieces of shit. Um, it hurts the Biden administration because the protests are just, in the hundreds of thousands around the world. The United States has said that the Palestinians there are running low on food, clean water, and medicine, and that a ground assault would risk exasperating a catastrophe that is already unfolding. It's a catastrophe because they got nowhere to go. They can't get into Egypt. What are they going to do? Go to the sea? Remember the chant from the river to the sea? And you thought the Palestinian protesters were the words of Hamas? Well, here you have a standing military, which Israel has, against a people that don't have a military, which is what the Palestinians are. So they have to rely on groups like Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad because they don't have a military. Who's going to defend them? Saudi Arabia? Qatar? Munafiq. That's what Saudi Arabia is. That's what Pakistan is. That's what Qatar is, and Bahrain, and United Arab Emirates. Fake Muslim, Munafiq. Mr. Netanyahu promised on Sunday to offer Palestinians safe passage to northern areas of Gaza. There is nowhere to go in northern Gaza. You leveled the place to nothing. Before the ground invasion, though, he offered no details. He said that Israel had no choice but to finish its assault on Hamas. We have no choice but to destroy what's left of the Palestinians. In other words, that's what he's saying. Now, you can't come right out and say it, but that's what he's saying. The United Nations and aid groups have said that the people in Rafah, many of whom already have fled their homes, at least once to escape Israeli attacks since the start of the war, have nowhere else to go. Now, for people who are saying that this is not a forced displacement, only evangelicals or Zionists are defending this. I mean, if you're defending the Israel, I made a tweet today. I said, if you're defending the Israeli government, you don't have a moral compass because we're well beyond. Look, I don't care what Hamas did on October 7th anymore. What the Israeli government's doing has tripled the effect of what Hamas did on October 7th. And you could lie about the stories that came out of there. It's what a lot of people did in the Netanyahu administration, propaganda minister. And, they started pumping out stories to gain favor of the world stage that, we need to use really brute force. But it was to get rid of the Palestinians, not just Hamas, not only Hamas. Now, here's the conspiracy. Well, there is no forced displacement. The Israeli government said that, once the area is clean of Hamas, the Palestinians are going to come back. No, they're not. And for weeks, you had people saying, the Israelis are not forcing anybody out. They're not expelling anybody. There's no document, no foreign policy guideline that states that Israel is doing this so that Israel can remain Jewish only. Let's go to a report that was published in January of 19th of this year. Israeli National Security Minister Ben-Gvir, Dracula, as I call him, calls for full occupation of Gaza, emigration of Palestinians. There he is, this piece of garbage, racist settler, which is a mixture of Netanyahu's cabinet. Just imagine, if you will, here in the United States, if we had a party, Republican or Democrat, that were filled with neo-fascists, fascists, nationalists, and outright racists. Well, guess what? We do have those people in Congress. They are just like that, but they're not as outward as the Israeli government is. Now, there's a reason why they're this way. It's because nobody held them accountable for anything. The international criminal courts can't because they're not co-signers. The United States won't because the United States is big brother. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf won't because they're cowards. Great Britain, France, Germany, Canada, the coalition partners, cowards. They're not going to do nothing. So Israel stands alone, just like the Palestinians stand alone. When I say Israel stands alone, I'm meaning they stand alone in regards to the amount of immorality, decency, human decency. There's nothing decent about killing 28,000 people, 12,000 of them children. There's nothing decent about bombing a refugee city of 1.7 million residents who you told to escape from the biggest city of all, Gaza City, and to relocate. Now you're bombing that too, knowing full well that Egypt closed the borders. Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has again called for the occupation of Gaza Strip and the immigration of the Palestinians from the besieged territory as the occupation states authorities and war cabinet continue to debate the future of Gaza after the ongoing war. In a minute, I'm going to tell you that that future was already preordained. For you nationalists and Zionists, this is no longer a conspiracy. I'm going to read you that report that leaked out. In an interview with Israel's Channel 13, Ben-Gvir, leader of the far-right Jewish power, the Otzma Yehudist, which has connections to the late Rabbi Meir Kahana's group, the Jewish Task Force. Need I remind you about the ghouls that run that group? That's right. These are the settlers. These are the people that will use violence as a means to expel the Palestinians and to have Israel Jewish only. Criticized the progress of Israel's war on the Gaza Strip and urged for more to be done to bring about a resolution. Isn't that something? You know, Israel is just basically wiping out entire cities, massacring people left and right. And here's Dracula here saying, we could do more. We could do more. It's a psychopathic government. Nobody in their right mind would read their thoughts aloud at a very influential position of power. Even the mummy Joe Biden doesn't do that. Even, you know, imbeciles like Donald Trump and George Bush never did that. These people, they're neither stupid nor ignorant. They know exactly what they're doing and they know they could get away with it, which is the reason why they could say shit like this because nobody holds them accountable. Now, if you think it's bad now, you wait 10 years from now because if we don't hold these people accountable, the next wave of people that dominate the Knesset are going to be people that want the third temple built and the end of the world through nuclear means. Because the rest of the world is going to get fed up at some point. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people that are fed up with the nation state of Israel. The resolution Ben-Gvir referred to was clarified when he further stated that Gaza must be occupied, stay inside it, and encourage the voluntary migration of its residents. If we win the war, it will be practically accomplished. Now, what does that mean, practically accomplished? Well, it's because of what I'm about to say next. Not here, but in a minute. This is not the first time the far-right national security minister has made such calls. No, but it is the latest to have been issued by him since the start of the war on October 7th. Similar calls have been made by other officials. He's not alone, like Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who's also part of Ben-Gvir's Yotzmid Yehudis group, and Knesset member of the Likud party, Danny Danon, who's been serving, you know, as the spokesman for years and years on the, you know, fourth and fifth terms of the Netanyahu prime ministership, who have in recent weeks called for the encouraging of voluntary migration of Palestinians. Look, they're saying it right on the air. Meanwhile, you have Netanyahu saying, oh, yeah, well, we're not forcing these people out. Yeah, they are. The rest of his cabinet is right out in the open. Yeah, we are. And when I talk about the conspiracy that evangelicals, oh, you leftists and socialists and whatever, you Jew haters, there is no document, there is no foreign policy guideline calling for the forced expulsion of the Palestinians. Well, that is until this article came out by Mina. Expel all Palestinians from Gaza. Leaked Israeli report says. In new bid to ethnically cleanse the enclave. Just like what the Libertarian Institute's been telling you for months. People like Scott Horton and Dave DeCamp, Kyle Angelone, Connor Freeman, Patrick McFarland, and Will Porter, and everybody else that has that's involved with that company has been telling you for months as long, and people like myself and Robbie Martin and uh, Robert Inakash and the Syrian reporter Salvik, I think that's his name, I'm butchering his name. A lot of people were warning that this is all about not just the elimination of Hamas, but the forced expulsion of the Palestinians of Gaza. Now, when the war started, I hinted that this would be part of the program, the response to the program by Israel. Well, with the leaked report, it is now factual. A leaked document produced by Israel's intelligence ministry has recommended the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, with the enclave's 2.3 million Palestinian population expelled to Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, a move that, if realized, would constitute a war crime, a human rights expert said was the reason why it was classified. The report, titled Options for a Policy Regarding Gaza's Civilian Population. Now, I have the report uploaded on my WordPress. Just type in those words in the search bar and it comes right up, and you read it for yourself. Recommends that Gazans, more than half of whom have already been displaced by Israel's bombardment of Gaza City, temporarily be herded into tent cities in Sinai that we're seeing in Rafah before cities are constructed in a resettled area in the north of the peninsula to house them. The paper was purportedly published on October 13th, 6 days after Israel began its ruthless and near constant bombardment. Doesn't it sound familiar, like 9/11? Just days after 9/11, we had the Patriot Act. We had the memorandum circumventing the Geneva Conventions for foreign combatants. All these just came right out in the weeks after 9/11, and all of a sudden this paper comes out 6 days after the attacks. It sounds to me like the report was already written and waiting for an incident to come by so that they could use it. That's Project for New American Century for you. That's the Oded Yanam plan. That's the Bush Doctrine, the Wolfowitz paper, and all these foreign policy summaries that call for a displacement of the troublesome Arab population in replacing rogue leaders with Western-backed Muppets. Well, that's what we have now. Egypt, Libya, Syria, well, Iraq. Countries that have been destroyed. By who? The United States and coalition partners under the influence of who? Israel. It's not a conspiracy. It's fact. And for you Zionists and nationalists who will defend this to no end, and the irony is that you claim to be a prophet of God. Don't make me laugh. You lack the necessary courage to criticize the real Satanists of this world, which are the governments of the United States and Israel, as well as Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. Intelligence ministry sources have confirmed to multiple news sites that the report is real, but claim it was only meant to serve as a basis for government discussions. which is not true. I mean, in the paper itself, it calls for a resettlement of the Palestinians into two countries, Jordan and Egypt. Those who fled from the West Bank will go to Jordan. Those who fled Gaza will go to Egypt. And as you can see, the 1.7 million displaced from Gaza went south of the border like they were told to. And now we're bombing that. Well, Israel is, with the United States military aid. That's it for this video. I just wanted to make a update video and offer my own thoughts on the subject without bias and without prejudice. Um, before you call me an anti-Jew or an anti-Semite, take one look at my channel. I shoot straight from the hip, as is. I read news reports and documentary primary source material, as is. I don't have any prejudicial influence when it comes to politics. I don't vote or racism. I don't cater to skin color. Or when it comes to religion, I'm atheist. But uh, I don't neglect people's religious faith. So I'm not persuaded by ideology, in other words, when I report the news. I report the news as is. And it's not because I'm getting anything out of it financially. I don't have any Patreon accounts. What I'm doing is what I've always believed, is that an informed public is a strong public, strong in one's own rational powers, and are capable to hold people accountable if need be. Okay, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Any more updates, you'll be the first one to hear it without bias, without prejudice. Have a good night, everybody. Stay safe.